Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another of our Managing Your Small Business Through the Pandemic webinar. This is number 59 of our webinars that we've been doing throughout the crisis. Good afternoon, I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm going to be your host and presenter today. I am the director of the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. And we will be getting through a lot of material today, so I'm going to start right away. First of all, you know that our webinars are sponsored by a variety of great organizations that help us do this. And as you see where it says Webinar Wednesday, there is the opportunity to actually get your logo up here. Haven't done that in 59 webinars, but figured, hey, we could always use another sponsor. But right now, we've had great support from the California's Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. Of course, the nationwide program is powered by SBA. We'll be using some of their resources today. We're a part of the California State University Bakersfield School of Business and Public Administration. Say that 3 times real fast. Also Mid-State Development Corporation, and also the County of Kern, all great supporters of small business in our region, in Kern County, in the state, and throughout. So thank you to all of them that make this all possible today. So we're part of the California SBDC program, which is part of America's SBDC program. As you know, 1,000 centers across the country, providing great services such as one-on-one confidential business consulting, training programs, and a lot of other resources that are available. So we're located in downtown Bakersfield in Kern County. Also, we service Inyo and Mono counties, our Eastern Sierra connection, in addition to the San Joaquin Valley part of Kern County. We do have 5 other centers throughout our Central California region, and they're located in Clovis, Merced, Modesto, Salinas, and San Luis Obispo, all providing great service, qualified business experts to help address your issues, problems, or expansion plans. So reach out to your local SBDC. One of the better values running down the road, if I do say so myself. So what's up? We're up to April the 28th, 2021. Well, for those of you that were on our webinar last week with a couple of chambers and mid-state development, we actually had some new breaking news program with the new EIDL Advance, the new supplemental advance that we'll go through. We also saw and actually heard for the first time the 24-month window that is available for EIDL now. And I think that is really newsworthy, and we'll get into some of this discussion in just a little bit. Well, being April 28th, 2021, we find that today is the opening of round 6 of the California Relief Grant, $724 million program for round 6. So your last shot, the last and final round, we don't anticipate any other rounds coming available. Nearly $2 billion the state of California has rolled out to small businesses, and we will talk a little bit about that and some keys in just a few moments. Well, we have the Restaurant Revitalization Fund portal, and we have some news related to the portal. And the portal actually itself is opening on Monday. Probably repeat that a little bit, but it is going to open on Monday. People can begin to start registering their businesses in the portal on Friday, this coming Friday. If you do notice a little bit different look today, we have the red, white, and blue of the U.S. Small Business Administration, as we have their slide presentation of the RRF, or the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. We've been talking about this program for several weeks, and only recently received authorization to use their official slides. So that part of the presentation will be coming up with the official slides from SBA used today. So you get a little bit different look from our usual color scheme, the beautiful red, white, and blue. The Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program had a very smooth reopening on Monday from all accounts that I've heard. So those individuals that have been waiting very patiently for a considerable amount of time heard from a couple of individuals that were able to get in and get their applications in. They're crossing their fingers and their toes, hoping that they did everything correctly. It is a very complicated grant program and not without its issues, but going to provide some great funding for a lot of really important cultural and entertainment venues that many of us have missed over the last 15 months. So also we'll talk about PPP. 2021 is kind of up and going, as we all know, and moving toward an end of the program in a little over 4 weeks. So we're going to see where we are on pace with PPP funding and look at some of the possibilities of other things happening with PPP. Our economy reopening continues, and we're projecting toward a full opening June 15th in the state of California. Until that point, here in Kern County, we're still at the orange level. Numbers are going very well as far as COVID-19 infection rates, and also a lot of the other key metrics and benchmarks that are used to determine which of those beautiful 4 colors you are, either the dreaded purple, red, orange, yellow. So we'll continue to monitor that. At orange, we're 50% open in a lot of our businesses, with many and all businesses now open, indoor dining and all the other fun things coming up. So hopefully that continues and we stay in that particular mode. We also have the ERTC, the Employer Retention Tax Credit for 2020, doing an amended filing for the 4th quarter or potentially even the 3rd quarter of 2020. It is open 2021, getting a lot of feedback from clients that are utilizing the programs and saying that they're surprised, number one, and number two, that it's just a lot of different form of accounting, of moving your numbers around in different pandemic relief programs if you have multiple programs that you've been able to access. So we'll take your questions. So use our question poll. Our Q&A box is open. Our question box in our chat box, what we're going to do is we're going to have a lot of resources that are available, a lot that we talk about today, a lot that we will email out soon. We'll probably do the email sooner this week that will contain all the references that we talk about, the links, the hot links, the, well, maybe not the edible hot links, but links that you can definitely find and get to this information that we're going to discuss today much more quickly. Any other issues, please go to the chat box, but Q&A at the end of today's presentation, and also a poll. And before we get to that poll, we'll note that the CSUB, the California State University Bakersfield Vaccination Hub, that has been open for several weeks, will be closing on May 14th. So for those 16 and older in the Bakersfield, greater Bakersfield, Kern County communities, you are welcome. They accept walk-ins. It's been open on a daily basis from 8 to 5:30, 5:45. You can book a reservation. They're free. You can show up. Appointments are recommended, but walk-ins from last I've heard have been getting in. And ever since the last few weeks, they have been administering the actual Pfizer, I believe Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So if you want more information, move on over to the csub.edu vaccines website, and you can find more information there. But the vaccine hub is closing on May 14th, so get them before they're gone. Okay, so what are some of the action points and some of the status that's going on in our key stimulus programs that are open right now? Lots of programs have been open in 2021, and they serve a large and varied audience. And so for many small businesses, it's not a one size fits all. There's numerous programs out here, but your individual business situation will reflect which ones are best for your business, if any. So obviously we are going to be talking and have been since early January about PPP, and we'll have some numbers coming up for you on that and see if the funding is going to hold out through our anticipated date of May 31st, 2021. And also we will be looking at um, some of the other things. But as a potential borrower, if you're still trying to get into the first PPP, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to contact your lender. Start with your lender and see if your lender accesses PPP lending. If not, we recommend people contact their local banks, local community banks, your savings and loans, also known as credit unions these days. Kind of caught myself there, didn't I? But also a number of other online fintechs are available if you have a relationship, say, with a POS platform such as Square or others. So there's a lot of ideas and a lot of openings and a lot of people still taking applications for the PPP. We're seeing that there are smaller, much smaller size loans, people that maybe haven't accessed many of the programs before, potentially they weren't able to because of some of the rules and regulations, but they are getting in, and the average deal size, as we'll go over in a little bit, continues to plummet. We were excited to see a smooth reopening for the $16 billion available in the venues grant. Remember, that is it is a priority opening, but it is on a first come, first served basis like many of these programs. So once the funding is gone, it is up to Congress if they're going to be funded for a larger amount. We expect the venues and the restaurant grants to both be oversubscribed. So we're encouraging everybody to get in as soon as possible. Obviously, with the venue grant program opening on Monday, we're a couple of days into that. So if you still want to apply for that, we urge you to try to get any issues you have resolved and get into the platform as soon as possible. Lendistry.com is where you'll find the 6th round of the California Relief Grant Program. And this is a program that actually started back on December 31st. Many of you recall, we touched on it on a webinar that day, and actually have seen it grow through some growing pains with the platform, the portal that was used to jump in. And initially it was only funded to the tune of less than $500 million. The California legislature stepped up, and now all of a sudden now there's over $2 billion that are available to our small businesses. I can tell you, I've been hearing from a number of individuals who have applied, who had been previously waitlisted, who are now starting to receive notifications of funding. Hopefully that is you. If you haven't applied yet, there's still this last round, and there's still $750 million. Basically, a third of the funding is still available going into this last round. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund, we know the portal is going to be opening on Monday. We're going to go through that in much more detail, even more detail than we have in the past few weeks. And we'll get into that. The Employee Retention Tax Credit is open, and what we're seeing is people are starting to take the advice of our guest speaker a few weeks ago, Michael Stevenson, and actually jump in and actually try to manage their PPP to where they can actually offset more of their eligible expenses to non-payroll items, which leave payroll items open for the employee retention tax credit. So something for you to consider. A lot of news on EIDL, as we talked about. The EIDL loan is open, the advance, we'll talk about that in a few moments. The City of Bakersfield's Restart Loan to Grant program is open. What you're going to want to do with that program, which is essentially it starts off as a loan up to $50,000. Generally, it's based on about $2,500 per employee, up to 20 employees. And if you follow the actual covenants of the program, of the loan, it converts to a grant after 12 months. If you're interested and you're in the city of Bakersfield, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to either contact the city of Bakersfield's website, or actually the entity that is doing the hosting for them, Access Plus Capital, which is located like the Small Business Development Center in downtown Bakersfield. So reach out to them if that is a program that you would like more information on. PPP forgiveness. PPP forgiveness continues to be open. I believe now we've passed over half of the original PPP 1 loans from 2020 are now actually have been forgiven. And so again, you have 10 months after your covered period ends. So on that, as you make that election at the time of forgiveness, if you want a 8-week or a 24-week covered period. Now, if you got the loan on, say, let's say May 1st, you got your first PPP 2020, May 1st, then 10 months after that would have been the end of March, or actually the end of February. So that would have been, then take into consideration, there's your 10 months, then you have 8 weeks, and you're basically would be due if you have an 8-week covered period. That's what I'm trying to get at this point. You have the election to take a 24-week covered period. So for those that got very early loans and wanted to think about taking an 8-week covered period, if you do not have your forgiveness, it is easy to adapt it to a 24-week, and as an election you take at that time, and would be strongly encouraged for me. PUA unemployment for contractors is open until 9/5. I told you last week we'd talk more about the family leave tax credit, and we will. It just won't be this week. So thank you for that. We're going to jump in now to our poll and launch poll question number 1. And now that we've gone over all these programs, are you planning to take the employee retention tax credit in 2021? And that could be either or 2020, because there's still that election to go back. Now that we've talked about it the last few weeks, it's getting a lot more popularity. It's getting a great deal of traction. People are really finding out more about it. So are you planning to do something with the employee retention tax credit in 20 or 21? So you have a yes, a no, or a maybe. Can't ask for 3 better answers than that. Yes, no, or maybe. Oh, love those 3 answers. So what we're seeing is pretty good distribution between the 3. And we do have 60% of you that are in and voted now. So what we'll do is give you just another couple of seconds and end this poll. And we're going to end it with 63% of you voting. And are you planning to take the ERTC? Right now, maybe is 44%. So many of you are still looking into the program and looking into the possibility of being eligible for it. 34% say yes, and 22% say no. So thank you for that. And then there, as you see, what I had just mentioned, 44 maybe, 32 yes, and 22 no. So thank you for that. And let's move to our second poll question. And question number 2 today is current pandemic programs. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask, what current pandemic programs will or may you apply for? Obviously, it's different than before, but what programs as of today will or may you apply for? And that is the ERTC. And this is a multiple choice. You can select multiple choices here. It's the EIDL loan, the PPP, the ERTC, the Bakersfield restarts, the restaurant revitalization, and also the shuttered venues. So a lot of different choices available. All of your favorites are listed here, or most of them anyway. So jump in and give us an idea of which ones you're looking at applying for at this date. So we do have 52% of you in. Give you another couple seconds. It's a little more complicated with multiple choices, but are there any current pandemic relief programs that you might want to apply for? And 58% of you have voted, jumping to 60. Let's end this poll and let's share the results. And the results say that 53% of the respondents are still interested in the EIDL loan. And that would be, I'm sure, the EIDL loan itself, but also the Targeted EIDL Advance and the new Supplemental EIDL Advance that we'll talk about later today. PPP is still 45%. Also, 39% of you are looking at the tax credit. That's pretty consistent with what we just saw. The Restaurant Revitalization Program, 34%. Bakersfield Restart to Loan Grant, 26%, and 8% of you, always a small number on the shuttered venues. Really haven't seen a lot of activity in the greater Bakersfield, Kern County area on that program. A lot of the people we're working with are on our Inyo and Mono Eastern Sierra territory. So thank you. Thank you. And one last question just for the good times. And it's a question that we have asked a couple of times over the last few months, but just one of these days we'll show you how this all transpired on a timeline. But it's regarding the California Relief Grant, and timely with its last period opening for 1 week today. It's a current status on the California Relief Grant program if you applied. I applied and I was funded. I was applied and waitlisted. I am applying in round 6. I was not eligible or I did not apply. So jump in and give you a few moments to jump in on the California Relief Grant program. And over half of you have voted now as we horse race this thing up, as I like to say. Oh, waitlisting and did not apply are really kind of the leaders right now. Still got a few more of you jumping in, but with 64% voting, I'm going to probably in this poll. So last call and done. And what we see is that in sharing the results with you, we see that 33% of you are still on the wait list. So still on the wait list means you're still in the running for that $750 million that comes out today. There's still possibly some monies from round 5 that have not been all fully allocated, and they're in the process of moving out some of that still. So you still have a good shot. 29% of you either did not apply or were not eligible. 26% of you have applied and were funded for the program, whereas 12% plan on applying in round 6. Okay, thank you much on that. It's always great to get your feedback and to find out what our audience is looking at, what programs they're looking at, and which ones are going to be the ones that help you from this point on. And that's all we can go from is April 28th on. So we talked a little bit about the EIDL changes, and EIDL has been around since essentially about March the 18th. Our first webinar in this series was 100% on EIDL, just giving you a little bit of a timeline in dealing with what has happened with EIDL. And the Economic Injury Disaster Loan is an SBA program, and like many of you know, traditionally it is for property damage from a natural disaster. You know, an earthquake, a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, a drought, you name it. And that is typically how it works. And it's usually the property damage is the main component. Well, this is different because there's always been a part of this program that has affected our small business clients and also bigger businesses, and that is the economic injury disaster relief. So the economic injury takes into consideration the businesses that have been harmed, and therefore we now have evolved into about 14 months of an EIDL program. So that is kind of the timeline. The timeline is that it changed dramatically from the very beginning. The very beginning, they took in applications. It was their traditional application process, which was very detailed, tax returns, current financials, a very detailed process in order to apply. And then it was upload. It all changed with the CARES Act. When the CARES Act changed, it changed the process for EIDL funding. I just remember sitting around at the beginning of this pandemic with business and community leaders and sitting there just saying, how is the SBA going to get this money out? How this is such catastrophic. It is such a huge, huge issue with probably 3/4 of our businesses across the country. How is this going to happen? And it really happened when one of the ways it happened was, of course, with PPP, but then the fundamental changes with the EIDL program. And the EIDL program changed it came into the portal. It reduced the amounts. We did have borrowers that we worked with very early in the process that received that $500,000. It did drop to $350,000 before being lowered to $150,000 maximum. So that's where we've been with EIDL, and it was set to expire at the end of last year. And toward the end of last year, what happened was it actually was extended until 12/31/2021. So we got it extended, and then all of a sudden we've had other changes in 2021. And here are those changes. Your payment that was going to come due a year after you got your loan has now been deferred for another year into 2022. But the interest still does accrue on that particular EIDL loan, and that is the full EIDL loan. The Targeted EIDL Grant, it actually came out last year. We called it something else last year. I don't even remember what it was called. It wasn't targeted, which it wasn't as specific, but it was kind of an EIDL advance at that time. That's what we called it. So it was the EIDL advance then. Now it's the Targeted EIDL Grant for this year. And it was introduced to maximize the benefit for those in low to moderate income individuals. And we do have our EIDL map that I believe is in the chat. So you can look at the EIDL map to see if you qualified. And then we also now recently have seen the EIDL maximum loan increase from 150 back up to 500,000. And with that came last week announcements of a new EIDL program, and really kind of something that's important to me is a new timeline for everybody who received an original EIDL loan. So there's your Targeted EIDL Advance, and it was up to $10,000. And so if you'd received less than that, this maxed you out. We've gone through this many times. SBA will contact you. So there's your Targeted EIDL Advance for this year. And then last week we had this gentleman on, Corey Williams. Many of you were probably there in a different webinar that we host monthly with the Hispanic Black Chambers of Commerce of Kern County and Mid-State Development. And he decided to let us know a few more things that are going on, and they were happening that day. One of those was the Supplemental Targeted EIDL Advance, where actually now what that does is it adds another $5,000 to recipients that have received the full $10,000. That could be either last year or this year. And actually, though, they need to be in a low income area. Again, the map is in the chat. Instead of a 30% economic loss, they have to suffer a 50%. So really going after those really significantly impacted and damaged businesses, 50%. And instead of having fewer than 300 employees, it is now they have to have fewer, they have to have no more than 10, so 10 or less. Now, the 10 or less is kind of an interesting conundrum for me, because if you had 10 employees, if you have 10 employees, you received the full 10,000 last year. And if you did not, then if you had less and you met the other criteria, you were able to advance up to the 10,000. Okay, we've said a lot of times now. But so how does it affect those 10 employees? I'm assuming that you're still in if you could meet the criteria for the 50% drop and also be in the low income area per the map. So that was one of the big changes with EIDL that we heard last Thursday. The other one that really I think is important is that it really changes the EIDL spending period from 6 months to 2 years. You know, privately, this was a real concern of mine, and also publicly at times during these webinars, is that, you know, the EIDL loan that was widely used by many of you out there really initially was meant for a 6-month working capital loan and short-term notes. So once we got into EIDL and then the PPP and the PPP 24-week extended terms, they started to parallel, and you had the same amount of time to spend both your PPP funds and your EIDL funds. And that always bothered me because there wasn't guidance that actually provided that. This came around and said, now your EIDL spending period is from not 6 months, but now for 24 months. And I think that's important. You know, it really calls the need also for, and I'm talked about this before, and I'm going to be talking about this in the next few weeks, is the need for more documenting and allocating expenses for multiple grants. And every program you get into does not allow you to actually, you know, use those funds for multiple programs. For example, if you used it for PPP, you can't use it for EIDL. You can't use it for current recoveries. You can't use it for other programs as well. So it's really important for you to be able to document and allocate those expenses, and we'll discuss that more in the next few weeks. So our shuttered venue operator grants, again, they're being accepted on a rolling basis until the funds are exhausted. Once your application is in, it is time-stamped. There is a priority on who will actually have it, who will get it. It will be reviewed for those in their priority range that we've shown many times. And of course, know is those that have sustained a 90% or larger loss. And with venues, there are a lot of venues out there that fall into that category because they just have not been open at all. Or they've been using and actually attracting other revenue. So again, you're going to want to get in and get into the portal. And again, you're going to need some certain things such as a DUNS number and a SAM, which is cage, and go through some other things. Again, this is a complicated grant. Fortunately, the restaurant grant will not be as complicated as this. So there's your priority, your first 14 days of awards that started on Monday. The period kicked off on Monday will be those 90% or greater. The next 14-day period is 70% to 90%, or excuse me, suffered at least 70% to 90%. And then 25, it drops to 25 to 70. So there will be potentially supplemental funding available. One of the interesting things SBA came out and said with this program is that we could be funding businesses to a $0 amount, meaning that they will have approved the application, but because they have run out of funds and Congress may appropriate additional funds later, they're going to say, you're conditionally funded if there's more money available, but the funds are gone at this time. So again, this grant is basically, it's really focused on fixed performing art venues, theaters, a lot of the museums and others, cultural facilities. So not so much on artists or promoters, but the talent agents, some of the exceptions they will apply. So incomplete applications are rejected. You only get one chance. And in the platform, we recommend that people save frequently. So this is round 6. This is it for the California Relief Grant. And could be one of the last times we talk about it on Webinar Wednesday, because this grant period does close next Tuesday at 5 o'clock on May 4th. So again, if you've been waitlisted from either of the previous 5 rounds, you will become eligible. If you're just getting in, and we did see quite a few of you that are still planning to apply, we encourage you to only apply once. There were a lot of individuals who had troubles in the portal, and they went through and tried to do it over again, and it created duplicate applications, created delays in their processing, etc. We also recommend people use Google Chrome, and to try to use it from either a PC, a laptop, or whatever, but to use Google Chrome. And before going in is to clear your browser cache. You're going to want to allow pop-ups in Google Chrome. So allow pop-ups, and if possible, use the incognito mode in your Google Chrome browser. And while you're doing that, have all your other browsers and tabs except for the Lindustry portal closed. If you have any questions or difficulties, if you still have a question or about a previous application, please contact Lindustry. Since the portal did reopen today, it is probably a little bit busy on the Lindustry front, but there's the 888 number, the toll-free number that is also you'll find in our chat, or also you can email them at that particular email address, californiareliefgrant@lindustry.com. Okay, payroll or paycheck protection program. And these are the approved lending as of not the 18th, but of the 25th. Didn't quite get that updated. So this is as of Sunday, and we're up to 249 billion spent. Recall there's 284 billion. So roughly we're looking at, about $36 billion left. The average substantially smaller this round as our smaller borrowers have been able to access PPP funds, down to 48,293 and falling. And as of the last week, we did see an increase in the number of loans approved. The week before we were in the 300,000 range and $7 billion. This week it was 8 billion. And an average this last week dropping even further to 20,000. Still looking to get into PPP, please hurry. You can still get in under the first draw. I'm not sure if you can get in under second draw if you've had to wait 8 weeks. So if you were really one of the real early PPP first draws in January, you're probably at that window to now you can go back if you've used your funds and talk to your lender about this, but there's a chance you can go back to get a second draw, even though it's all been done in 2021. So a couple of other things is that the game changer in PPP was on March 3rd, and it was for sole proprietors and your smaller businesses. Remember, your sole proprietors are those business entities that do not elect anything, do not elect to become a corporation, an LLC, or partnership, or have any other official agreements or entities. So by doing nothing, you're a sole proprietorship, and you're able now, off of your Schedule C of your 1040 package that you file with the government, as far as the IRS with your taxes, you're able now to use line 7, which is your gross income, rather than line 31, which was net income. Big game changer, particularly if you haven't had employees. If you have employees, you factor that in. But really being able to go back, and if you've only filed 2019, that is fine. You can use a draft of what you're going to file because the tax date is still open. Just please, whatever you use with your lender in the SBA as far as a unfiled draft version of your Schedule C for 2020, please have it reflect what you actually file. So we've talked about all the opportunities that are available. Really, the opportunities that I see are those smaller businesses, and I have been reaching out to everybody I can. I strongly encourage each of you, those small businesses, for example, your landscape professionals, mechanics, others that just might not have heard, maybe English is a second language, try to get them the information or try to put them in touch with somebody who can provide them with this information. I think this is a great program right now for those that really have made, as far as gross income in their business, 100,000 or less, because it really opens up this program that wasn't open up before. And there's some other unique situations where they can jump in. That's us next week. And now let's jump into the Restaurant Revitalization Program. These are the slides from SBA, please recall. So we'll be using SBA slides for the rest of this presentation. Thank you, SBA, for providing these. Just a little bit about it. There's going to be 28.6 billion. Talks about the American Rescue Plan Act, which became public law on March 11th, and that is the source of funds that come through this. And again, the eligibility is wide. It's called the Restaurant Revitalization, but also if you're a food stand, a food truck, a food cart, a caterer, a bar, saloon, lounges, taverns, you see all the other businesses, even down to snack bars and non-alcoholic beverages such as coffee shops, ice cream shops, bakeries, brewpubs, other types of beer processing that has at least 30% of their gross receipts as a retail level. So really, once you start getting into a number of these, starting with bakeries, you have to have essentially on-site sales, which are retail sales of 33% or more. Get into the breweries, wineries, distilleries. Inns has some very special, so if you are a innkeeper, you have some unique rules, and it has to do with the on-site sales of food and beverage, must be at least 33% of your gross receipts. Also, some of the other licensed facilities or premises for beverages or alcohol producers and similar businesses. So much beyond the scope of its name of Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and also really kind of shows you the depth and the scope of the number of businesses that are going to be applying here, which is why I think it's crucial that you get in on Monday. Even if you are outside of the priority processing, it is a first come, first served program. You may be eligible for up to $5 million per location. Minimum award is $1,000. We were concerned that you might have to actually be registered in SAM or need a DUNS or cage identifier. That is not true. For those that have an ITIN, the individual taxpayer identification number, they are acceptable. They need to be valid and timely and not expired. So there's some FAQs that are for those that have or use ITIN as their main source of identity. That is the direction you're going to want to go toward the IRS, and those are available. So let's talk about who's not eligible. We've talked a little bit about government's not eligible. Really, if you have more than 20 locations as of March 13th, 2020, you're not eligible. If you have a shuttered venue operating grant, you're not eligible. If you're a publicly traded company, no eligibility there. If you permanently closed, or if you're a nonprofit organization, or you're not eligible for funding up to $1,000. So if you don't meet the minimum $1,000 funding, you're not eligible. So various forms, basically all forms of government or forms of entity for legal businesses are eligible. You see the most common ones, but also there's B corporations that are listed here, and they're eligible. And what you need to do is select either a C or S corp on the applications, depending on how individually you are taxed. So B corporations, not common, but already have made an instance for them. So as far as franchises go, as far as eligible franchises, the franchise must be listed on the SBA franchise directory, and applicants should look up their kind of their code or number on that. So if you're a franchise, you have other concerns and some of the issues that go with franchises. If you're in bankruptcy, doesn't necessarily disqualify you. If you're in bankruptcy with a reorganization plan, and you're using either Chapter 11, 12, or 13, and you meet all the other program requirements, you're eligible for funding. However, if you've permanently closed, you're not. And also, if you're in a Chapter 7 liquidation, or if you have a 7, 11, 12, 13 bankruptcy, but you do not have an approved plan of reorganization. So how do other SBA relief programs impact the RRF? Well, if you've received PPP funds, they're telling you the applicant must use the same EIN, the same employer identification number that was used in the PPP. If the applicant applied for the first draw for multiple locations under one EIN, and then the second draw, they must provide the EINs for each entities they received the second draws, that received the second draws. So a little bit into the weeds there as far as multiple industries, entities, and so forth. Boy, here's something that's common. There's your attestation by the applicant. All applicants must certify that current economic uncertainty makes the funding request necessary to support ongoing or anticipated operations. And what can you use the funds for? A variety of different business expenses. You can use them for obviously payroll costs, supplies, food and beverage purchases, operating expenses. You can use them for certain construction expenses, and that being mainly the construction of outdoor seating. You know, expansion costs are ineligible. So if you're looking to move from a 60-seat diner to a 90, you can't use these funds for that. Business debt, payment on any business mortgage obligation. And of course, this does not include the prepayment, but making your current obligations is eligible. And how long do you have to use the funds? Well, you've got until March 11th, 2023. And again, see, this is where we get back into, I don't want to call it the accounting aspect, it's just the classification of your expenditures within grant-funded programs. And as you see, you could have used these funds for expenses that happened as far back as February 15th, 2020. Now, that's over a month before, are managing your small business through the pandemic #1. So a month before, you could have used these funds once you received them for expenses that are eligible for that period, going back all the way to 2020. And then forward to 2023, March 11th, 23. If the business permanently closes after receiving the funds, the covered period will end when the business permanently closes. And that can be on or before March 11th, 2023. Any funds not spent on eligible expenses need to be returned to the US federal government. So, again, after the funds are awarded, have been exhausted, entities must provide a detailed expenditure report and certification. So there's kind of this process of going through, an accounting afterwards, similar to, sounds like PPP forgiveness. But after they've been exhausted, you have to provide a detailed expenditure report and certification for the required period. You're also needed to provide self-reported unaudited data detailing use of each funds through 2023. And there's going to be additional guidance on helping with this reporting requirement that comes along later. So there are 3 different ways to calculate how you can actually, if you can qualify and the funding of your particular application. Calculation 1 will probably be the most common, and it is applicants in operation prior to or on January 1st, 2019. And then it's the simple qualification where you just take your 2019 gross receipts minus your 2020 minus PPP. Okay, let's look at some more complicated situations if you started your business after January 1. So calculation 2 takes into consideration if you opened up sometime during 2019. And so what it will do is what it will take your average monthly receipts times 12 minus your 2020 gross receipts minus PPP. So visualize this. Let's make this one simple. So let's say you're in business, you start business on July 1st, 2019. You will have been in business 6 months, 6 of the 12 months. So half of the year you were in business. So you could take your 6 months receipts and double them, or you can use the standard formula for 2019, and that would be to take your average gross amount. So take your average for your total receipts for 2019 and divide them by 6. Either way, you end up with the same number. So you end up in the same boat. And then you subtract that by 2020 gross receipts minus your PPP loan amounts. And that is your PPP first draw and your PPP second draw. Now, applicants that are from 2019 can choose this. So if you opened in 2019, you can choose calculation number 2, or you can use the next calculation we're going to talk about, which is calculation number 3. However, the SBA warns you that calculation 3 could take longer to process your loan or grant. So with calculation number 3, what you're going to want to do, and these are going to be mainly for businesses. We saw the ones in 2019 that opened in 2019. But if you opened between January 1, 2020 and March 10th of 2021, and the applicants not yet open, but have incurred eligible business expenses. Then what you do is you take the total amount spent on those eligible expenses, and your timeline is February 15th, 2020 to March 11th, 2021, minus your gross receipts for 2020, minus your PPP amount. So this is an interesting look, and one of the first times that the SBA has said, well, gee, if a business was planning on opening a restaurant in April Fool's Day of 2020, and they had just spent 6 or 8 months or longer renovating a restaurant and incurred all this expenditures, and the pandemic did them in, then it's been punitive to the fact that for many of the programs, they haven't been able to access because they started their business afterwards. But the planning started well before. So this kind of remedies that situation. Okay, so what can you exclude from your 2020 gross receipts? Well, we've talked about your first or second draw PPP, regardless if it was received in 20 or 21. You also can exclude your EIDL loan, your EIDL advance, your targeted EIDL advance, or any other grant funds received by the CARES Act. So that would include your B-CARES, it can include your current recovers locally here, and other local programs wherever you might be. The last one, I have no idea what the Randall-Shepard Act financial relief and restoration payments appropriations, and sadly, I don't even think I care. So hopefully if you have funds from that particular program that I just mentioned, you know more about it than I do. So to apply, you can apply through restaurants.sba.gov. Again, I hardly recommend that you jump in on Friday and you set things up and register, and you come back on Monday into the portal. One of the things that we're anticipating is the reason the SVOG grant went so well this time around is Shuttered venues at this time had kind of a staggered entry into the portal. So if you recall buying very popular concert tickets where you were actually placed in a queue, that is what happened with Shuttered venues, and we anticipate that same process for restaurants. You can also go through your point of sale vendor. Right now, the last I had heard, there were 3 point of sale vendors that were actually approved by SBA. So you might want to check to see if you're on that list, and you might want to apply through your vendor. Or there's the telephone number, and we'll try to get that telephone number up in the chat for you if you want or if you need to apply via telephone. And please recall there, it says that telephone applications will have a longer processing time. So 3 ways to jump in. And these are the documents that you need to have and have ready. Last week, we went through SBA Form 3172 detailed. What you need to do is you need to go in and print that out, complete it, initial it, and sign it. And then completion of this form digitally on the SBA grant platform will satisfy that requirement. As in many programs, the SBA will require your tax returns, and they'll require it from the Internal Revenue Service. So they use Form 4506T with your permission to actually pull your tax history. Then you're going to need some documentation that details the gross receipts. And really, you need just really any of the following documents that can demonstrate that for you. And that can be your business tax returns. So your tax forms on 1140, your 1120, your 1120S, your 1040s, 1065s for certain partnerships. That would also include your K1s. You can also use bank statements, internal or external prepared financial statements, a point of sales report, including your IRS Form 1099K. So the point of sale would probably be something that would be handled easier through the point of sale portal part of it, but we'll see. So what documents do you need in order to apply? And again, if you're doing calculation 1 and 2, And you know what we're going to do is we'll include this. This is a lot to go over. We'll include this particular slide separately in our email distribution of forms because we're running out of time, and I'm running out of voice too. So calculations 1 and 2, you'll see what is required there. You'll see a lot of the different statements. A lot of these we've already talked about with calculation 1 and 2. Calculation 3, it's obviously going to be different because you're going to have eligible expenses rather than historical financial information in order to provide. So obviously, if you're in the alcohol sales business, or even for bakeries and other businesses, you're going to be able to need to document that at least 33% of your sales came from internally created retail sales. That's what I'm thinking of. So your retail sales, it really needs that. And for some reason, they want to exempt out maybe businesses that were more successful. But I think obviously if you have a bakery business and half of your business is wholesale or 3/4 of your business is wholesale, that was impacted as well. But for whatever reason, 33%, and these are the ways that you can document that. You can document it from Tax and Trade Bureau forms, state and local forms that were filled. But really, you need to be able to document that 1/3 of your gross receipts came from retail sales. There's those in applicants out there, and I know we got a few out there. Thanks for joining us. You're going to need to be able to document that 33% came from food operations. So on-site sales of food and beverage to the public. And I guess that's key too, is that it is on-site sales of food and beverage that would substantiate a successful application. Some really good information here is that there will be a call center hotline for those of you that are having problems getting through. You can contact us at the SBDC or contact your local SBDC district office. For that's the Fresno district office. So you can contact them. Unlike the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, SBA is able to provide assistance directly into this particular program. And the good thing is they have help available in multiple languages. So they're recommending that you complete the documentation in advance, leverage your resources, and use the help that's out there from your SBDCs, your accountants, etc. Whatever is what SBA recommends. SBA is not able to make any corrections, so please make sure that when you get in, correct. And there's also that interesting aspect of those that still intend to apply for the PPP. So if you're going to apply for the PPP still and the RRF, you're advised to complete your PPP application in advance of the RRF. So I'm telling you to get in the RRF on Monday. You really need to, if you're going after a PPP, you need to find and talk to your lender this afternoon or tomorrow, would be my best advice I could give you there. So there's a pilot period that SBA is going to actually randomly select existing PPP borrowers from a priority group. And then we have priority periods. And the priority period, day 1 through 21, is that initial 21-day period where only applications from small businesses owned by women, veterans, socially and economic disadvantaged applicants will be funded during this period. So my understanding is you're able to apply on day 1, but on days 1 to 21, they will only approve applications from women, veteran, and socially and economic disadvantaged individuals. After that period closes, then they will actually go through the other applications. Applications will be time stamped. So it is important to get in early and to get in the queue and to get in line and not be at the back of the line because funds are expected to be exhausted from this particular program. And so the priority groups, we did mention women, veterans, socially and economic individuals. It's a self-certification process. And the example they give is one I think we've used in the past. If you have multiple owners, let's say in this case, you have 5 owners of 20% of each. 2 of them are veteran, 1 is social and economic disadvantaged. Technically, that puts you at the 60% threshold, which is greater than 51% and allows you to do that. So the other 2 could maybe not fit in any of those categories. The same thing is if you have 3 individuals that are in a business, and you have a veteran, and you have a woman, and you have a social economic disadvantage. Obviously, that's 100%, but if you take one of those away, it's and use the same criteria, 2/3 is still greater than 51%. Here's the definitions. We've kind of gone over these before, but the social disadvantaged groups are presumed to be socially disadvantaged are Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, which includes both Alaska Natives and Hawaiians, Asian Pacific Americans, or subcontinent Asian Americans, which I do not know the definition of those last 2. Economic disadvantaged are those that are socially disadvantaged individuals whose ability to compete in the free enterprise system has been impaired due to diminished capital and credit opportunities as compared to others in the same business area who are not socially disadvantaged. So please look long and hard at those. And it's a self-certification process. Make the right decision. And do realize that any entity reorganization for the purpose of qualifying for the priority period will result in automatic disqualification. So if you're in a partnership and you have the partnership is 50-50 between a male and a female, and the male doesn't meet any of the other qualifications, then it's presumed to be a 50-50 and not qualify. If all of a sudden you come up with a document that says the business is now owned 51% by the female and 41% by the male, SBA will disqualify you for that purpose. There's your set asides, $5 billion with gross receipts of $500,000 or less. So there's going to be $5 billion that is set aside for applicants whose gross annual receipts are $500,000 and less. Also, $4 billion is going to be for restaurants or businesses that are 1.5 million in gross receipts or less. And then a small 500 million, well, I don't know how small 500 million is, but it is for those that have not more than 50,000. And remember, you're going to need to, on that calculation, if you opened up in 2019 and we're only open 1 month, and you did $49,000, you're going to need to prorate that as we did earlier through the process. So that's it. That's the official SBA slide deck on the Restaurant Revitalization Program. I'm going to jump into the questions now and stop my share. So let me get in my Q&A box. And as I am starting to do now, I answer anonymous attendee questions last. I apologize for that. So hold tight, we'll get there. I have a landscaping business. I'm a sole proprietor. I want to apply for the EIDL loan. On my Schedule C is the cost of goods sold box. I don't have anything in there. On the EIDL app, it asks for that amount. Do I put 0 or asking for net profit? There are businesses that do not use cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold oftentimes involves inventory, beginning and ending, and also materials and labor that actually goes into the physical manufacture of a good or a service produced. So it's very likely that many businesses don't have that. So you would put in a 0. And generally the EIDL loan is the criteria for that. It is judged on, and the amount is judged on essentially the gross profit. So if you take your sales and you subtract it by your cost of goods sold, you have that gross profit. Also, we're seeing that the EIDL awards are trending much larger now, given the fact that they're reflecting that 24-month period. So when you apply for an EIDL now, it is including periods from in the past and moving forward also. If you were denied for the EIDL previously, can you reapply? What I would do is I would go through the EIDL, the SBA disaster loan call center. They have both an email address that we frequently have in the chat box. We'll have them in our resources if we don't get them in the chat box today. But do check our chat box to see if there is a toll-free number for the EIDL reconsideration. And that's what you need to go through, is go through the EIDL reconsideration. They're going to want to know what's different in your business over last year. And again, if you made a mistake on calculating your gross profit, that could be a perfectly good opportunity and a perfectly good reason. Okay, next question is, Tehachapi is not considered low income. What I originally heard was needed for the targeted EIDL grants. But now I hear moderate income qualifies. Is that? Well, I think sometimes we use low income and low to moderate income interchangeably around here. There are certain areas, I think for the large part, Tehachapi is outside of the census map that qualifies you as low income. So there are a few outlying areas because it really doesn't use the zip code. So your 93561 zip code would not apply. It would be the actual individual census tracts. And we've actually ran into situations where people that have applied qualify on one side of the street and don't qualify on the other. So again, it's those census tracts and looking at that map and identifying where you are in that census tracts. But there's a lot of areas that actually do not apply. And so that is the best answer I can give you there. I don't understand the EIDL increase. I got the email and link to portal saying I could apply for 4 times the original grant, and i.e. 24 months of revenue instead of 6. SBA is making that determination. They are reaching out and contacting people for the EIDL increase based on your business history and your application process. They've run an algorithm to determine which of those might want to apply and might want an enhanced amount. Again, the reason is that originally, you know, I think many of us thought this was going to be a 6-month issue. And now that we're in month 13 and a half, it's not. And it's going to continue for a lot of businesses still. So what was hoping to be 6 months worth of working capital for small businesses, that is the design and intent of the EIDL program. Now, SBA has recognized that a lot of businesses really need 24 months. Now, if you've got an email, then SBA has identified you as someone who potentially would benefit from this. This is your call. This is your call. You're the one that is going to be taking on the additional debt. The EIDL loan is a loan. Again, it's 30 years at 3.75%. So you're the one that's going to be able to look at your business situation and to apply that and to see if you actually need that particular funding. Okay. What about the PPP loan filing for a 1065 K1 partnership distribution? Which line do I use for the loan amount? Well, that would be the original. It would be similar to your original. If this is a second draw, it would be similar to your first draw. So it would essentially be 2.5 times your payroll, 2.5 times your monthly payroll from 2019. Partnerships generally are not considered a sole proprietorship. So what you do is you use the payroll consideration. And again, that's going back to the original calculations that we used last year and this year. and that's 2.5 times your monthly average payroll for 2019. Can you ask for less than the maximum amount allowed in the RRF? It's a great question. And remember, the RRF is a grant program that lasts for several months, even over almost a 2.5-year span. So, and it does not need to be repaid. It is a grant. So my advice would be to actually go with the amount based on your calculation. And if you've determined after you receive that amount that you don't need the full amount, SBA will take the amount back. But I think just not to avoid any other confusion in the actual application process, I would apply for either calculation 1, 2, or 3. Yours would be most likely number 1. And if it's a larger amount that you think you need, then what you can do is after you get in and get the program gets moving along, SBA will provide guidance for those that have received more than they actually need. Okay, if we have not received a notice yet from SBA, have we been overlooked for an increase? If it's for the EIDL loan, probably not. Those are just now going out. So if you initially received the maximum of 150,000 and you were heavily impacted by COVID, then there's a good opportunity for you to actually get that request from SBA. Now, it's going to take time because there's a lot of people that are going to be contacting, and it's going to. So I would just hang tight for now. There's going to be some initial guidance or additional guidance on this. I'm trying to go back from last Thursday's webinar to see if this question was addressed, but I believe that SBA will be reaching out, and if you haven't heard anything in probably a week to 10 days, shoot me an email, or actually what we can do is get additional guidance. The other thing that you can do is you can contact the call center for the EIDL program, which is, I believe, in your chat right now, and just call them and say, hey, I haven't heard anything out on increasing my EIDL, and I was heavily impacted. Most likely it's just taking time to get to you, but if you want to be more proactive, you can call the toll-free number and address it that way. Hi. Well, hello. Our business received the second PPP loan, second draw. Does funding from this and the restaurant revitalization conflict? It's considered double dipping. Well, only if you use the proceeds from both loans for the same expenditures. Let's say your payroll is coming due at the end of April. Let's say you're a monthly filer and your payroll is $20,000. Then as long as you allocate that $20,000 to either your PPP or your Restaurant Revitalization Fund, then there's not a conflict. The double dipping occurs is when you use the same expenditures for multiple relief programs. Okay, do I know when the PPP2 forgiveness portal will open? I don't. In May, we hope to get and look a little bit at PPP2, kind of look at PPP1 first, but at the same time, start looking at PPP2 and looking at the forgiveness portal. For those that are under 150,000, I still am wondering, whereas I'm expecting more guidance on PPP2 forgiveness because number one, you were able to actually, without presenting any documentation, if you were looking for a PPP second draw of under 150,000, you were able to actually not present any information. And if you have kind of the same process we have with PPP1, with seemingly an automatic type of forgiveness process to where you just certify, there's been no verification on either end by SBA. And I'm just leery that that's going to happen. So I would expect more guidance, and more guidance is going to come. I think really PPP1 is one that you really want to get forgiven. and kind of go from there. Okay, so that wraps up the Q&A box. Let's jump into chat real quick and see if a question got in there. Just a comment, I see the funding circle was a good PPP funding source for this individual. Let's see. And there's a question regarding the pandemic unemployment insurance as a small business owner. Still get residual income, but less. I believe you would qualify partially. I think it would be similar. I'm just using an example off the top of my head for an employee that maybe has been unemployed and then comes back to work 16 hours a week, to where they're entitled to still partial unemployment, but you need to go through a process of claiming the income that you have. And then the state would do some type of reduction. However, having said that, and reading the news clippings about the EDD, I'll just leave it at that. So any other questions here? See all these great resources. Thanks to Maureen Busher-Dang, our producer, for putting these in. You'll see Maureen's got lots and lots of links that you can pull in. One last question. It's for the California Relief Grant. It asks the type of business. I don't see an option for a mobile food business. Any suggestions? I would probably pick the closest one. It could be food and beverage. It could be cater. It could be restaurant. But I would look at your options and I would pick the very closest one. There should be something that is actually pretty close to it. If it doesn't have the specific mobile food vendor, then actually just go with the closest one that you have and you should be fine. Okay, long one today. We'll be back next week, number 60. So that's it for this time. Great to get through 59 of these. We'll have things going on next week. I even get to maybe might be making a little road trip next week within our territory. More on that later. So anyway, for Maureen Busher-Dang, our producer, I'm Kelly Bearden. Thank you for joining us this week. We'll be back next week. Any questions, send us an email. Resources will be out soon. Good luck with your Shuttered venue and restaurant revitalization grants and your California relief grants. All of those will be, you'll be in those before we talk next week. So goodbye, everybody.